The silent war against Christianity. How Wicca leaders are undermining the faith. What if I told you that witchcraft isn't just a fantasy from movies? It's a growing movement actively pulling people away from Christianity. You might think Wicca is just a harmless nature-based belief system, but beneath its surface lies a calculated effort to challenge Christian values, distort biblical teachings, and normalize practices that were once condemned. Wicca is not just another spiritual trend. It is one of the fastest-growing religions in America, with estimates suggesting that over 1.5 million Americans identify as Wiccan or Pagan, outnumbering even some Protestant denominations. But what's even more shocking is that many of these new Wiccans were once Christians, lured away by a mix of moral relativism, pop culture influence, and deceptive teachings. How did this happen? The answer lies in the Wiccan leaders who shaped the movement and strategically positioned it as a better alternative to Christianity. 1. The corruption of Christian morality. Christianity is built on absolute moral truths. God's commandments define right and wrong. But Wiccan leaders have introduced a new, deceptive morality that directly contradicts biblical teachings. One of Wicca's core principles is the Wiccan Rede, which states, "And it harm none, do what ye will." On the surface, this sounds peaceful, but in reality, it allows individuals to define morality on their own terms, rather than submitting to God's laws. Consider Scott Cunningham, one of the most influential Wiccan authors. His book Wicca, a guide for the solitary practitioner, encourages people to practice spirituality without religious authority, without pastors, churches, or biblical accountability. His works have been bestsellers for decades, influencing millions of teenagers and young adults who feel restricted by Christian teachings. The result? A generation that believes morality is subjective, that sin is just a personal choice rather than a violation of God's commands. The effects of this are visible in society today. Casual attitudes toward sin. Many former Christians who adopt Wicca reject the concept of sin entirely, instead choosing to believe that actions are only wrong if they harm someone in an obvious way. Increase in occult practices among youth. Surveys show that young adults are more likely to believe in astrology, tarot readings, and spellcasting than in biblical teachings. Christianity being labeled as restrictive. Wiccan leaders present their faith as a liberating alternative to Christianity, making biblical values seem outdated or oppressive. 2. The worship of false gods and the rejection of Christ. The first commandment is clear. You shall have no other gods before me. Exodus 23. Yet Wiccan leaders actively encourage the worship of multiple gods and goddesses, steering people away from the one true God. Gerald Gardner, the founder of modern Wicca, reintroduced pagan deities like the goddess and the horned god, claiming that Christianity suppressed these old beliefs. His teachings have led thousands to reject Jesus Christ in favor of alternative spiritual paths. Take the case of Raymond Buckland, a student of Gardner who brought Wicca to America. He popularized Sax Wicca, a version of Wicca based on Saxon paganism, where followers honor gods like Woden and Freya instead of Christ. His book, Buckland's Complete Book of Witchcraft, is one of the most widely used Wiccan manuals, encouraging people to abandon biblical monotheism for polytheism. Many ex-Christians who join Wicca begin by exploring harmless spiritual practices, meditation, crystals, astrology, only to find themselves slowly drawn into full pagan worship. The Bible warns against this. Do not turn to idols or make for yourselves any gods of cast metal. I am the Lord your God. Leviticus 19:4. Yet Wiccan leaders continue to spread the idea that worshiping multiple gods is a more natural form of spirituality than Christianity. The Hollywood agenda. Normalizing witchcraft. How did Wicca become so widely accepted, despite the Bible's clear warnings against it? The answer lies in Hollywood and pop culture. Over the past few decades, Wiccan beliefs have been strategically inserted into movies, TV shows, and books, making witchcraft seem fun, empowering, and completely normal. This didn't happen by accident. Many modern Wiccan leaders have actively worked with filmmakers and writers to shape how witchcraft is portrayed. Consider this. Doreen Valiente, one of Wicca's most influential figures, wrote poetry and rituals that became the foundation of modern fantasy literature. Shows like Charmed and Buffy the Vampire Slayer featured positive portrayals of witches using magic for good, despite the Bible's clear condemnation of sorcery.